Hi, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, or whenever you see this. And I'm very, very happy because I have two amazing women with me, Judy Cantor-Navas and Jennifer Otter Bickerdike. And we are Bickerdike, sorry. And first I'm going to introduce them, and then we will introduce the topic and we will start the conversation. So Judy Cantor-Navas is a writer and music curator. She's also an expert in culture and Latin music, and she has been consultant for Encanto, has been nominated to the Grammys for the Notes of the Complete Cuban Jam Session, and has published in Billboard, the New York Times, Variety, and has participated in panels worldwide. And she has an amazing podcast that she has produced, and she has been the lead writer. It's called Punk in Translation, and it's about the Latin influence in the punk music and many things that we will be discussing today that you don't probably know. And you can find the podcast in Audible. And then we have Jennifer Otter Bickerdike. Sorry, Jennifer.
It's okay.
And she has a doctorate on cultural studies, and she's an author. And her more recent books are Being Britney, which I have here, and You Are Beautiful and You're Alone, the Biography of Nico, which both of them I recommend because, Britney is in the news all over the place. I think the Biography of Nico, and I've read a lot about Nico and the Velvet Underground, is probably the best one I have ever read, and it's the first biography that challenges all the stereotypes we have ever read about Nico and the Velvet, and it's the first biography I read about Nico with a gender perspective. So I dare you all to read it, please. And she has also worked in several record labels and has been involved in marketing and branding campaigns for Rage Against the Machine, Nirvana, Gwen Stefani, and many other people. So a really impressive lineup, as you can see. And we are going to talk about how all this, there is a whole movement of people doing podcasts and writing biographies and writing articles that defy the narrative we have heard. We all have been growing, and we all have grown listening to the same stories and the same narrative because they were told by the same type of people. Basically, no offense here, anybody, white heterosexual men. And suddenly you have a whole generation of journalists that are challenging everything that has been written. They are writing it from a gender perspective, race perspective, migrant perspective. And I think this is very interesting because you cannot separate the music from the politics. Everything is political. And these things, these stories are finally being told. And Judy has been writing about the influence of the Latin community in the punk scene, which is amazing. And then Jennifer has been writing about Nico, as I said before, and Britney. So I would like to ask the two of you, how did you come up with these ideas, and what discoveries did you make along the way during all these months researching? What was the most surprising thing you found?
Judy, do you want me to go first, or do you want to get the ball rolling? What would you like?
You can go first.
Okay, well, I'll just start with Nico because the Nico book happened. I had written a book on vinyl records, and at the time, my then literary agent, I really wanted to write a book about yacht rock because I'm a complete and utter nerd for all things late 70s, early 80s, like Hall & Oates and the Doobie Brothers and this, that, and the other. And we started talking, though, about other things I may want to write about. And I'm total dyed-in-the-wool crazy feminist from Santa Cruz, California. And I really, having worked in the music industry, and I bet Judy has similar stories to this, I never thought that the way I was treated was because I was a woman. I never was like, ooh, the vagina is the reason I'm being treated this way or that way. But I did want to start writing about women from a female perspective. And I came across Nico, and I couldn't believe that she was rated as being one of the most important women in rock and roll history by like Rolling Stone and Spin and different kind of sources like that. But there was not very much material written about her. And when I would talk to people about her, the people that knew who she was, it was always the same thing. It was, she was a junkie, she fucked all these guys, and that was kind of it. That was the end of the story. That they didn't really know anything else about her, and that she was a racist. Those were kind of the main three things that kept coming up over and over and over again. So that really intrigued me because those things are such broad brushstrokes, and they're also just make someone so small. And that made me want to really dive in even more and figure out, like, why are these the three things? Why are these the three narratives that people talk about over and over and over again? And why is it so deductive to these things? That's really where it started. And then what you just said, Carolina, is so true. When you look at who is written about Nico at the time when she was active, it was almost entirely men that were writing about her. And it was from a male. And something else that we were saying before we came live, a lot of the women that were around, I would say they were almost like threatened by Nico, and wrote, the people that did write about her that were female wrote quite rude and horrible things about her. So I wanted to kind of get to the bottom of what was the truth. You know what I mean? Was there more to her than a woman that slept with a lot of famous men? Was there more to her than a woman that had an opiate addiction? And that was, there's all these tales of her being a racist. What was the truth behind that? Was she racist? Was she not? If she was, why? So that was kind of me wanting to challenge the mythology. That was the beginning of it all for me.
And how did you do to research? Because you also talk to many people, you cite many sources. Where do you start?
Well, I'm sure Judy's the same. Like as a journalist, you are, number one, a complete and utter nerd if you're a good journalist. So it's just, nothing gets me more hot and bothered than a good old archive. Are you there with me, Judy?
Yeah.
As sources that nobody's seen before. I mean, come on, like, the poor husband doesn't stand a chance against that. You know what I mean? So, so, I started off by making a wish list of like, these are all the people I know I want to talk to. And these are all the sources I know that probably will have something related to Nico. And then from there, as you girls probably know from doing the work yourself, suddenly all these things, it just starts spreading out. Like, oh, well, I know someone that was Nico's neighbor. I know someone that she used to buy her cottage cheese for, like, all these bizarre things. And like, yes, you know what? I was really lucky. I got an amazing interview from Iggy Pop. Yes, I was really lucky. I am friends of Henry Rollins. Henry Rollins gave me an amazing interview. Those interviews are fantastic, and I'm honored to have them. But my favorite interviews, and Judy, you probably had the same experiences in your work, came from people that are not household names, came from people. One guy was Nico's neighbor when she lived in London. One woman, Nico babysat her kids. Those were like the best stories. And that was, I think, the real essence of who Nico was as a person for me. So that's how I went about doing my research. I mean, yes, there were times when I did go to an art. I mean, before we got on here, you guys saw the lack of Espanol I can speak. I was having to, I did go to some archives where things were in German, and I'm like using Google Translate like a maniac, going, oh, please, sweet baby Jesus, translate this to something that this stupid American can understand. There is some of that, but I think a lot of it is just constantly, you're going to hit, like, out of like 100, you're going to hit probably 80 dead ends, but those 20 things you get are just gold. And that's what makes the book.
And now let's go to the podcast, because one thing that I found amazing about the podcast is there are these chapters where they explain perfectly well how some very well-known punk songs like Louie Louie actually come from Latin rhythms and cha-cha-cha and Cuban music. And when you listen to it, and this was so obvious. How come no one ever told me? How come I never noticed? So how did you come up to this, Judy?
Okay, well, first off, I just wanted to say a little bit about our team for the podcast for Punk in Translation, because it is an Audible original production. and the also producers were Fresh Produce and La Coctelera Music. Just want to, give that shout out to the small but mighty team that did this. Well, it's similar to what Jennifer's saying, because it's like you pull a thread and one thing just leads to another. So when we kind of did have this mandate, okay, this is going to be about Latinos in punk. But how do you talk about, Latinos in punk? Because there's not like there's this, one Latino in punk movement at a certain time. That's not what this is about at all. So I was the story producer. So I really went from the idea in the beginning, these are stories from the Latinx punk experience. And those, as you'll see, if you listen to our 8 episodes, are many different things. But then you start seeing how they all relate. And not only were we looking at people who identify as Latino, in many cases, people who were immigrants from Mexico to New York or to Michigan or to LA. But also how Latin music itself somehow, had its influence on punk, and what you're saying, Louie Louie, for example, or we start looking at La Bamba. And, not maybe people don't know that Los Lobos, in the beginning of their career, they weren't very involved in the punk scene. So, we talked to Luis Perez from Los Lobos, and we kind of get back to La Bamba. La Bamba keeps coming up as kind of an original punk song. It was really interesting that Richie Valens, who had already had a big hit, Come On, Let's Go, and he could have done any song that he wanted, but he decides to do La Bamba, this traditional Mexican song, kind of in a more rock way, and kind of, was saying like, fuck you, what do I want to do? I want to do a song in Spanish. So there were kind of all of these things that were very punk in their time, even if we didn't call it punk at that time, and leading all the way up to the present. But it's also, why don't people know? For example, someone who, for me, became kind of a hero of our podcast is Rosie Rex. And because what I started looking into was, Latinos at CBGB. Because you don't really think of CBGB, you start thinking, well, I don't know who was a Latino playing at CBGB. And of course, many people there were, but maybe their identity at the time, as one person on our podcast says, we weren't like screaming it out at the time. We weren't shouting to the rooftops about being Latino, for whatever reason, and maybe their identity evolved in different ways. But for example, Rosie Rex is this amazing drummer from Puerto Rico, and she and her brothers had a band when they were kids, and then she came to New York, and all she wanted to do was play rock and roll. And they did have a band that played at CBGB, and they played some songs in Spanish. But yeah, at that time, when they tried to get a record contract, the record people were like, you have an accent, like they didn't like the accent. They wanted her to be blonde, so there's just a lot of stories. And then she hooks up with Sylvain and ends up doing 2 groups with him. And so, you're discovering this and talking to her, and you're just like, well, why didn't I ever know this? But I guess luckily we have these platforms to do this. We start doing our research.
And can I ask Judy a question?
Yeah.
Judy, when I was doing my PhD or my master's, actually, one of my professors said something to me. She was writing about the architecture of the Turkish house. And she said, once she started writing about this architecture, she saw it everywhere. Like she would see this architecture in like a matchbook. She would see it like a plate of French fries would come to her, and it would have the Turkish house architecture, like what you're talking about. I can just see like suddenly everything makes sense, and you're just seeing these songs and this rhythm and this history everywhere. Is that how it was for you when you were when you started getting into this? That's like, 'cause I've never thought of this area before. It sounds like so fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, from the very beginning, I was thinking of it like a fanzine, that you're just kind of finding these things like, okay, yeah, wow, this is really cool, this is really interesting, and then you start putting them together, and then it's amazing how much connection there is when it becomes one thing, even though all of the stories of the different people who were profiling, who are, of course, telling their own stories, were very different. We're very, diverse in terms of, this goes back to from 1966 to the present. So there's, a lot of stuff in there, but yes, it all has its connections. Totally.
And for me, it's very crazy that now everyone tries to look and sound Latin because everyone is listening to reggaeton and Latin music. And now you think, okay, but all the injustice done before, no one is going to claim that.
Well, I always say that, like Latin music, it's not an explosion. It's not this thing that comes up and goes away. This is the patrimony of millions and millions of people, and it's very complex and it's very wonderful. And, so, and also, yeah, just even the prejudices that there are about Latin music is reggaeton, or before it was salsa, or it's this, or it's that, which is ridiculous, as it's so many, many things. And in this case, one thing that's all, I was a rock critic in Buenos Aires years ago. I was just telling you that. But people always call music from South America. If it's rock music from South America, it's derivative, and something that's always really bothered me. But, and so also in this podcast, it's also something that comes up. So, why do we always have to look at things from north to south? As far as the United States is concerned, why can't we look at it from south to north and recognize that so many things come originally from south to north, instead of always saying, oh, no, like in the case of Louis being directly influenced by a cha-cha-cha. And that's, one case.
And it's also very interesting because we talk about Latin music, but we don't talk about Anglo-Saxon music or European music or American music or Asian music. So it's like we put everything, a whole continent, into just one category, which is. But also happens with music made by women and books written by women, and I'm sure you've been asked about this too, is, oh, do you think there is a way of writing if you're a woman? And it's like, or even, I was even reading Tori Amos, and she was also saying why they keep on, even Kim Gordon, when she decided to write Girl in the Band, she was like, why am I always asked about the fact that I'm a woman? Like, you cannot be taken seriously just because you're a girl or a woman. So I think you have maybe found this too, because, well, there is some of it in the biography of Nico, and obviously in the Britney, because we have seen how the media was treating Britney Spears. But not only Britney Spears, we were chatting before about how Shirley Manson posted on Instagram this image that said, it was a cover of a magazine, and it said, why do you have to hate Courtney Love, Shirley Manson, Cool Chic, or just rubbish? I mean, how people wrote about music when it was made by women. So do you have to break these taboos?
Well, it's interesting because, I'm friends with Susanna Hoffs, who was the lead singer from the Bangles. And she and I have had this conversation so many times about one of the things that she still gets asked. It was 40 years ago that she was in the Bangles at this point, 40 years ago. And she's sent me, and she has shared stuff like this on her Instagram too. It's like, what's it like to be a girl in a rock and roll band? You never ever get a man asked, what's it like to be a man in a rock and roll band? What's it like to be a girl lead singer? It's like, one, I've never had any, I don't know about you two girls, but when I wake up first thing in the morning, I don't grab my vagina and my tits and go, oh, sweet, I'm a woman. Now let's move forward with this day and think about how I'm going to go with it. You know, I don't. I only have my experiences in this body being who I am. And one of the things that I've said before is that, you know, I wrote Britney right on the back of having spent 3.5 years writing Nico. And God bless my husband, because I was so angry. The anger in me after writing Nico, the way that Nico was treated in her life, the way her legacy has been treated, and the way that women and men reviewing the book spoke about me in their reviews as a writer and spoke about Nico. This was so hurtful. And something that Susanna said to me, she's like, you just have to ignore it. Like, they're not you, they're not your friends, they have their own agenda. And I think I can't write, me personally, I can't write I don't write from an agenda. I don't write from my vagina. I write as a person, and I write from how I would like to be treated as a person, regardless if that person has a cock and balls or a vag. Like, that's basically it. And that's my point of view on it. You know, it was hilarious because I think it was a really big newspaper here in England. It was one of the first reviews I got for Nico. And the reviewer was like, Otter Bickerdike genders Nico. Everything's about gender. It's like, yeah, it is, ho, because Nico's whole thing was that she was a beautiful woman and she was slagged off for being beautiful. She was slagged off for, quote unquote, destroying her looks when she started doing drugs. So you have to talk about gender. So it's like you are crucified if you do talk about gender. You're crucified if you don't. So I guess what I'm trying to say is just authentically be yourself, no matter what it is you're writing. And that can't, I mean, like, when your face, Judy, like, lights up when you're talking about Louie, like, I'd never even thought about these things. I'd never even heard of your podcast till we got on here, and like, I'm dying to hear it. And it's because it's so authentically something that you're excited about. That's what makes for good writing, I think. Not thinking about, oh, I'm a woman and I'm gonna fucking jam my fucking tits up into this writing. That's just my opinion on it. But you tell me what you think, Judy.
Well, for me, you know, obviously in this case and so many others, for me as a journalist, you know, I let my subjects lead the way for me. And that's really the fun of it too. Like, those conversations, they're telling you about themselves, and then you're kind of taking that football and saying, okay, and that's going to lead you to something else. Yeah, you don't go into it with some kind of preconceived, you know, notion that you're just going to layer on top of that. For me anyway, you know. And that's why when we set out to do the punk in translation and talk about Latinos in punk, instead of trying to force something, you know, we talked to so many people, you know, from, like, you know, Jello Biafra to, you know, to people who from the Dead Kennedys, and, you know, people, you know, I told you, from Louis Perez from Los Lobos, rock critic Dave Marsh, Clem Burke from Blondie. But of course, we also talked to so many people that you've never heard of. And, you know, I just really let them lead the way. And that, for me, was the fun of it. And also, you know, I just feel so good about giving them a chance to be heard too, you know.
Because that's so easily could have become sorry, I'm like asking the question, but I could see how that could have been an agenda, though. Like, because I get asked that so much, like, as a woman, and I'm like, if I lead with being a woman, then I'm not going to get the most authentic, real, exciting interview or because it's all about the conversation, that connection you're having with the subject, you know. So if I could see, like, if you led with you being a woman, or the fact that punk rock and, you know, in the Latino community has not been talked about that much, there could be like an anger that could taint that conversation. But what I'm getting from you is joy. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And one thing that I love to this day, I've listened to the Finnish podcast a few times, and, you know, there's some intense experiences there, but there's also, like, they were having so much fun. And I think that's some things that we're going to remember, like from the 70s, for example. You know, these people were having a great time. And also there was, you know, that moment, I guess, kind of at the birth of punk, that it was so diverse. And it was people kind of trying on who they were. and trying on these identities in the way that we really can't do today because things seem to be more rigid. So I don't know, I learned a lot from them, really, or I remembered a lot, of ways that you can be in the world, and be fearless, kind of. There's a lot of fearlessness in this that I loved.
But I also think if you have decided what your interviewer are going to say, then don't make the interview. I mean, you have to approach the person completely open-minded, and of course there are topics that you want to talk about, but you don't have to settle, okay, this is what I want you to say, this is what you have to say, because then why do you interview them? Just do the talking yourself or do the writing. And that's what you always mention. When I heard the podcast, I was listening, people were really excited, and they were really talking about many things they wanted, you could never imagine, and you could feel the passion. And even the narrator, she's so good. She's incredibly good.
Ida, who, has had all of her own experiences being, Mexican from Tijuana, her own experience as a woman. But I think through a lot of this was like kind of asking, okay, what is punk? Because punk is a lot of things to different people. And what is Latino? So we had that parallel, so we could really start with those two questions, I think, what is punk and what is Latino? And then the answer is so many different things. So I think it was great that we could show that.
I just did a webinar last night. We were talking about hip hop and how hip hop's a lifestyle and a culture. And I said punk rock is exactly the same thing. Did you guys get to something that was like, this is like the 2 or 3 pillars that everybody shares of punk rock? Or for everybody, was it just completely different?
Well, I think for a lot, there was definitely something, the music of outsiders, so, being a misfit and then kind of finding your tribe. That was definitely a huge theme. And that was interesting too, because it kind of went along with being Latino, Latinx, or being an immigrant of any kind. And then kind of finding or maybe creating a place where you belong. So yeah, that was definitely a big theme. And just kind of like punk, like doing what you want to do and saying what you want to say. I think those were big themes across everyone. And also the fact that, most of the people who we're speaking to, no matter what generation, I mean, they were teenagers when they started playing music or getting into a band. So they're, it really paralleled that whole thing of when you're first discovering. It was about self-discovery, really,
Chapter, Ceci Bastida goes to see her family.
Yeah.
And asks them, how is it possible that you let me hang out with these guys who were older?
Yeah. He's like in high school. And she's in a band with 30-year-old guys. And then they're like coming, this guy on a motorcycle, 30-year-old guys coming to the high school to pick her up. And she's like, well, that was kind of gross, but of course she didn't think about it at that time. So yeah. It's yeah. Yeah, and I think we definitely take, maybe you could say it's a loose definition of punk, but I feel like maybe it's different people's definition of punk, So I think that's great too. We could go on and do, a whole other season, definitely, because this is not something we're not trying, never was trying to say, this is it. This is everything you need to know about Latinos and punk at all, because that's ridiculous. So, yeah. Could go on and on.
How do you change your mindset to write about Britney, which is a completely different story? And also, I'm very curious, did the Free Britney movement happen as you were writing, or did you have to go and do some rewriting?
Oh, girl, the amount of rewriting I've had to do for Britney is like I just that whole project. So what happened is I pretty much finished Nico, and I was looking for the next project. And one of the things, like I said a second ago, that I loved about Nico, working on Nico, I found frustrating and incredibly angering, but I also loved working on it, was dispelling the mythology around Nico. And I thought, who else is there tons of mythology around? And as weird as it sounds, there's so much mythology around Britney Spears, but it's like the exact opposite. Everything's been played out on social media. Everything's been played out in tabloids. And I went and looked, and there wasn't like a thoughtful, researched. I mean, these words are not what you attach to Britney Spears. Academic, like these are like the exact opposite. These are like the polar. These are like the vanilla to Britney's chocolate, if you would. It's like the opposite end of the color wheel. And I thought, you know what? I want to write a book that is actually, instead of just like listening to all the banter and the cattiness, I want to write a book that actually has a thoughtful look at Britney's place in the pantheon of culture. And that's why I decided to write it. So Free Britney had already started when I wrote the book, but it really kicked into high gear literally a month before I started, because I was having to do promotion and activities for Nico at the exact same time when I was having to write Britney. And I think I had at one point my my publisher said, I want you to write the book in 2 weeks. And I was just like, oh my Lord. But I ended up writing the whole thing in 6 weeks. But that was with constant rewrites. We were rewriting up until literally I think like a week before it went to print. So I think I gained like 2 stone over the process of writing those. Like now I'm losing them, thank God. But this drinking, eating. I mean, there was one point I remember during, it was like literally I was doing press and promo for Nico. I was writing Britney. It was this horrible heat wave in London. So it was like 33 degrees. I think I'd worn the same pair of like jean cutoff shorts for like 2 weeks. And I just looked at this desk, and it was like scattered of Diet Coke cans. The computer screen looked like I'd rubbed a salami sandwich on it. And I was just like wallowing in how gross and disgusting I felt. And I remember Susanna called me. She's like, you're in the writer's zone. And I'm just like, I felt like Jabba the Hutt. And I'm just like, yeah, this is so fantastic. So it was quite stressful, but at the same time, I'm really quite pleased with the product that came out at the end. I think it's a thoughtful book that does critically look at Britney as a purveyor of culture and why we cling on to her in that way.
That she's the incarnation of the American dream, and that she has also surpassed in popularity to Cher as a gay icon.
Which is so weird, isn't it? I mean, to me, that's blasphemy.
I mean, yeah, for me it was also very shocking. I would have never imagined that.
Nobody should ever surpass Cher or Dolly Parton in anything, period. So, you know, when I was reading it, so Judy, what she's talking about is there was different polls that have been done that Britney Spears is the #1 gay icon in the gay community.
Wow.
Surpassing Judy Garland, surpassing Cher. I'm just like, no, say it ain't. Yeah, say it ain't so, but it's true.
Oh, and what were your conclusions as to why? I mean, not only for the gay community, but what is this obsession with her?
The obsession with, I think the reason she's surpassed Cher and Dolly is because, let's just call a spade a spade. If you're 20 years old or 18, those two, as much as I love and worship Cher, and let's just say it, Gypsies, Tramps, and Themes is a tune that will never go out of style. Okay, let's just be real here, people. And Dolly is just, you know, a goddess and probably animatronic at this point. But you know, so Britney is much more current. And I would say if you're 20 at 40 years old, Britney is going to seem old to you and like probably a matriarch of the gay scene. I think the thing with Britney that surprised me the most, I think you asked us that, what surprised us, is the word authenticity that people applied to Britney. And as someone that grew up much like Judy, I'm a total dyed-in-the-wool punk rock kid, total DIY, came up very like lower middle class on food stamps in America. So authenticity to me means working your ass off for everything you have. It means being like scruffy. It means probably not being the cutest kid around town. And Britney is the antithesis of that. Britney is shined up and manufactured and fake titted up to the nth. So when people are telling me they find her authentic, I was really surprised and shocked by that. But that's what a lot of people see in her, because she was one of the first celebrity figures to have this massive public mental health meltdown in front of the world. And that really, really, really connected with a lot of people. And I think there's that whole thing. There's the thing of, if you look at someone like Madonna, bless her cotton socks, let's not, if you're of a certain age, which I think all three of us lovely ladies are, we'll remember Madonna's horrible British phase. If you remember when Madonna lived in Britain and had a British phase, I'm making her sound like Mrs. Doubtfire. And you listen to Madonna talk now, you're just like, girl, when did you go to Princeton? Britney, bless her. She sounds like she just got off the corn cob truck. You know what I mean? Like, she has no airs about her at all. So she talks like someone you would meet at the 7-Eleven, bless her. And so there's that about her. And there's also, with all the whole story of how she's literally plucked from obscurity and thrust into this fabulous lifestyle. So I think all of those things together create like this special, and then she's like picked apart by the media, and everybody loves an underdog. So I think all those things together make her a special kind of celebrity that there's not very many like that. And that's why people love her.
But also you have, for instance, Miley Cyrus. She also changed completely, but
oh, you got robotic, Carolina. Can you come back to us?
Yeah.
You hear me now?
R2D2. Yeah, there you are. Okay, yeah. So, Obi-Wan, we need you.
You hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So for instance, if you see Miley Cyrus, she also had like a breakdown too, but people were not so keen about her, but maybe because she was more sexual, and Britney has never been too sexual.
Oh, Britney was
not as much as Miley.
Well, Britney, what's interesting is there's a part in the book where I talk about, and like, again, I didn't think about how creepy this was. There was this moment in like is right after it got revealed that Britney had sex with Justin Timberlake, after this whole media thing about I'm gonna be a virgin forever. Miley Cyrus actually came out and said she was gonna wait until she was married to have sex. And then of course, how does Miley blow up? She blows up by the video where she's swinging around Starkers, and then she does the whole twerking thing with what's his face, Robin Thicke. So I think the thing with Britney is that she has nowhere to go, really. Like, she was the ultimate virgin next door. And then at the kind of what one thing that Judy just said that I just absolutely love, and I think Judy and I should do like a book or some other show about this, is the idea of freedom. And that is, in the 70s, and I would even go so far as to say in the 80s, there was so much more freedom in terms of experimenting with who you are, what you wanted to be. I don't think that women going in the 2000s, there definitely was a rebellion against the feminist movement. And once Britney didn't have her virginity anymore, she had nowhere to go except to be a slut. And I think with Miley's just enough younger than Britney that she wasn't thrown into the slut pile. She just kind of is Miley Cyrus, like kooky Miley Cyrus. Where with Britney, she didn't really have that option. Does that make sense? I think people are just kind of tarred so hard now. Like, do you know what I mean, Judy, by that?
Yeah. No, totally. I know. There's the idea, now of just kind of trying on something because you want to, and saying, I'm going to be this. It's like, you can't really do that anymore.
Do you think that
unforgiving? That's the word.
much more criticized. Like why? Like we had like Alan Vega. Like, why did he pretend he was Puerto Rican for a while? Well, in that case, because he felt like it, But that was like, when I wrote that, I had to answer to people asking me about that, and I'm sorry, maybe, yes, people who hadn't lived through that era couldn't really understand. Why would somebody just say something? Because they found that offensive, I guess. And well, okay, yeah, I can understand that. But on the other hand, there was that freedom of just being able to say, I'm going to wear this and I'm going to pretend I'm this, or even that idea of pretending, which you can't really do anymore. I mean, in an innocent way, not that you're hurting anybody.
Not in a mean way.
Yeah.
It's really like this. There's no forgiveness, and like the instantaneous thing of being canceled for something, and you can't change your mind. You have to be right on this specific agenda. It's funny because I keep talking about this webinar I was doing last night on hip hop. When I was 4 years old, I used to tell my mom I wanted to be black. I wanted to be black. Like, I thought being black was the coolest thing ever. Like, I loved all the cool black people on Sesame Street. I know this sounds really strange, and like I loved black music, everything about it. And like I've told people that before, and they're like, you cannot say that out loud. You cannot say that in public, that you wanted to be black. And I'm like, what's wrong with, I don't understand. I think it's because I didn't realize there was anything wrong with being black, or as a white person, you can't aspire to be black. It's kind of not that, I don't know the context of what the story you're telling, Judy, exactly, but I never put on the identity of wanting to be black. But I feel like you can't have honest conversations or talk about desires or ideas that you had in a lot of ways, or make mistakes without being instantly tarred as a bad person. And really, in the case of Britney, she was a kid coming of age, being a teenager, with the media, with the world media following everything she did. And I know if, we just moved recently, and I have photo albums documenting my 20s and early 30s. I mean, there's pictures of me doing cocaine, there's pictures of me drinking, there's pictures, all kinds of shit in there that I can never run for public office because someone will find these pictures, let me tell you. And I'm not a celebrity. So all I can say is, we should, the person that cast the first stone, so I do feel for Britney.
But you also say there was more freedom then, and I think there are two factors. One, there wasn't social media. So now if you get wasted one night, the picture is gonna come up in a story, or who knows what. One thing I love about Berlin is that it's forbidden to take pictures in clubs, completely forbidden. They kick you out. In Berlin. Yeah, it's if they let you take pictures in a bar or in a club, it's not a good one. It's for tourists.
Concerts, I would imagine that people can still be.
No. I remember seeing Animal Collective and being called off because I was taking a picture. And in some clubs, they put stickers on your phone camera. So on one hand, we have this social media thing. Now it's very scary to go out and do whatever because everyone is going to know, even if you don't remember the next day. And then on the other hand, we were very naive about many things, like what you said. As a kid, you would say, I want to be black, because we were very naive. Now we have more knowledge that we didn't have before. So now,
consciousness.
Even our families, because maybe our families would have thought, okay, the crazy idea of the girl, but now it's we are more aware of what's going on. So for instance, in the podcast, there is this story that Kid Congo Powers say that he doesn't speak Spanish because it was important that he was good in English. He had a proficient English. And now these things don't happen any longer. So I think it's a mix of the two factors.
Yeah, that's changed so much that actually a lot of the people in our podcast, they don't speak Spanish, even though their families are are Latino. And for example, Bobby Valderrama, who's from the group Question Mark and the Mysterians, and when he went to school in Michigan, his parents were migrant workers who moved to Michigan. And he said, well, my older brother, he started school and he was speaking Spanish, and the teachers were just like, no, you don't do that here. I think they sent him home. And so when he was a few years younger, so his parents were just like, that's it, no more Spanish, you know. So yeah, it's interesting to see as we get to younger people, maybe from more current bands and going back, yeah, they're singing in Spanish, and why shouldn't they?
What
Right?
a loss of culture is that? I mean, it just reminds me, like my grandparents, they were immigrants from Italy, and that sounds exactly like my grandfather got picked on and made fun of in the schoolyard because he didn't speak English, and they didn't have Italian accents. They never spoke Italian, and they're gone now. And like, there's so many questions I have, and like, my husband's British. He'll ask me all the time, "Oh, is this like?" My husband knows more about Italian food and Italian culture than I do. And I'm half Italian. It's horrendous, and like, this whole part of who I am, I know nothing about.
To go spend some time in Italy, get back to those roots.
Well, girl, you think I'd been eating the pasta by like the weight gain writing Nico, I'll tell you that much.
But yeah, I mean, sometimes, yeah, we look at these things in the United States and we're like, wow, how could that be? But yeah, that's the way it was.
Especially melting pot. Like, do you remember like in the 70s and 80s, the big push for like, we're the melting pot, like everybody come together. And it's just weird because like, we're the most racist in so many ways, like so many issues with race, so many issues with not accepting the outsider. And like these whole, like you're talking about, these whole like cultures just like completely erased.
Yeah, the melting pot was like, yeah, you speak English and you need to look like this, to be taken seriously and all of that.
It's funny because in Europe that they call it integration. In Germany, they even have integration course. And they teach you the language and the traditions and what's typical in Germany.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Integration.
I wouldn't want to know what's typical in America. It'd be like being obese and Walgreens, not Walgreens, Walmart. Those are basically deep frying all your food. Those are like the three tenets of America. Oh, there's not any Americans on here.
Carrying a gun, don't forget.
Yeah, oh, that's right. Yeah, I forgot. You can tell I've not been in America in a long time. That's right. Yeah, carrying a gun.
And actually, do you think, talking about this, that maybe one of the reasons why Nico was so rejected, even by the Velvet Underground, is because she wasn't American, she was a woman, she had an accent, she was very strong. She didn't give a fuck about what people said about her. So maybe that's one of the reasons too.
I mean, absolutely. Nico was other in every single way. When Nico joined the Velvet Underground were like a house band that nobody knew who they were. Nico was already an international supermodel that was huge in the underground film scene. So she was someone. They were no one. And that's one of the things that is most troubling is when the Velvet Underground got put into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It says the Velvet Underground and Nico, but Nico was not actually put into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It was just everybody else but Nico. So her otherness of being a woman, her otherness of being German, her otherness of not having English be her English be her first language, all those things were things that supposedly we celebrate in America. We take everybody in, but those are all things that we rejected even after she died. And even when it comes to giving her an award, we did not want her. We did not accept her with open arms. And that's really one of the things I tried to do with the book. It's kind of like the sweetest revenge in a lot of ways. The book has done, knock on wood, as well as it has, and gotten the accolades it has. Yes, I am kind of what Judy was saying. Yes, I'm the one that put it all together, but it's Nico's story. That is, I just told the truth of what the story was with as many different voices to get the narrative as real as it happened. That was the important thing to me. And so it is kind of the best revenge for Nico in a lot of ways.
Actually, she didn't even have a woman's name because she was given this Nico name by a friend, and it was a guy name.
Yeah, and I mean, what's fascinating was hilarious because when I got the first drafts of Nico, I sent it out to one of my friends, the film director in Los Angeles, and she kept sending me these WhatsApp messages. She's just like, she's given a name by a man. She's like celebrated for her beauty, which she hates, and she kept like sending me these messages. She's like, when does the story get happy? And then like as she starts getting towards the end, she's like, oh no, oh girl, no. No. This is gonna have a shitty ending. No, ah! And then of course Nico dies at the end really tragically. But in a way, it's like that. Yes, it's a tragic ending, but in a lot of ways too, when Nico dies in Ibiza, which is her favorite place in the world, she dies having come off of heroin. She dies probably being healthier than she'd been in a long time. She dies hanging out with her son. So she's in a better place, and she dies in her favorite place by her own rules. And I think clutching a copy of Oscar Wilde's greatest hits, basically, which is fantastic. So it's completely a poetic ending to a troubled life, and in a way it's a beautiful ending at the same time.
Well, actually, when I was reading the book, when I was reading the end, that's the impression that I had, that she was living her best life in Ibiza. The best after everything she had been through.
She had been doing everything everyone else had told her to do up to that point. And when she got to Ibiza, she was just like, fuck everybody else. I'm just going to hang out here, figure out what the next thing is. And she was like at peace for the first time in like 40 years. Here's a woman that escaped Nazi Germany. She's brought up in Nazi Germany, and she tries the rest of her life to escape the whole paragon of Nazi Germany, that mantle that had been thrust upon her. And other people put that on her. And imagine, like, I think about this, and this is something that Judy can probably understand, like growing up in America, it's such a part of who you are. Even if you want to reject those values and those ideas, it's just inherent in like your DNA in ways that in your subconscious. And that is, I think, something that Nico struggled with her entire life. And I think by the time she gets to Ibiza, it's the first time in her 47 years that she finally is like, this is who I am. That's okay. Take it or leave it. And I can say, as someone that's 50, getting to that place of peace is very difficult. And she was at that place when she passed away. And that's, I think, a great gift.
Yeah, and maybe now it's the place where Britney is going to be too. You never know.
My publisher for Britney keeps hoping she's gonna die. He's like, please just die soon.
No, but she just said that she's pregnant, and that's the happy. Well, she's quitting Instagram every 2 days and then coming back to Instagram, and she's announcing that so it looks like after all this Free Britney thing, finally there is some.
Especially after all the strife we've had in America, specifically with, Trump and all the, just without getting it too politically in here. I mean, I personally have given up on the political system as someone that's been very politically engaged my whole life. Like going to a Jimmy Carter rally is one of my first memories. To see people being able to get together and make change is very, very makes my heart happy. It would make me happier if it was for something like, the right to choose over a woman's body, which you could argue was part of the trials and tribulations of Britney. But I just do wonder though with Britney how her mental health is, because after being in a conservatorship for 13 years, she went into it when she was 27. She's now 40. The difference between 27 and 40 is huge. So I do wonder about that. And I wonder, throwing a baby into that mix I don't know if that's really the best decision to do, but I wish her all the best. And I hope that she has a happy and long marriage to Sam, her fiance.
Yeah, it's one of the things that many people missed about this conservatorship. It wasn't just about Britney. If Britney was kept in this conservatorship, people with less money and less resources were going to have a hell of a life ahead. And now she has opened the door. So I think many people don't realize this is not just about a pop star. It's about all the people that are behind, and now that were hopeless, and now there is an option.
I think like the day after Britney testified in court, I believe it was June of last year, and she talked about how the conservatorship was controlling her reproductive rights. I think I did about 12 interviews in less than 24 hours, just with people asking me what I thought of it and what, the part about her talking about how the conservatorship was controlling her right to choose if she had a child or not. And of course, I was really happy that that part was something that was focused in on. But again, I don't want to steer off too much into this because that could be a whole nother discussion. In the United States, especially, a woman's right to choose what happens with their body is something that's being aggressively chipped away at actively. And the fact that it appeared on the news agenda because of Britney was fantastic, but it's something in my opinion that should be something we're actively talking about and fighting for on a daily basis, regardless of what's happening with a pop star. And so that to me was the blessing and the curse of Free Britney. It showed when there's a person that people believe in, and it showed the power of an icon. When there's a person that people believe in and look up to and can gather around, yes, people can motivate and motor together, but maybe just a cause itself is not something that's threatening enough. Yeah. It doesn't threaten my personal life. So therefore, I'm 50, I'm entering menopause. I'm not probably gonna have to have an abortion. So who cares? You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. So that to me was upsetting about the Free Britney movement.
Okay, so I think it's going. We have 5 minutes left.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Judy, I talked so much about that. Sorry.
No. I love all the stories we both have.
So, everything connects.
No, but I would like to, before we end, I would like to each of you to tell everybody of all the things you discovered when you were working in this. What was the most shocking or the most surprising or the one you would like everybody to know? Or maybe it's a bit difficult, or maybe just a couple of things.
Everything. How many hours do we have?
I don't know. I just think it's, as I said, it's a reminder to always, the whole experience was to be curious and don't go in just with your preconceived notion. Let the people tell the story, the people who are your protagonists, but also let the story tell the story. I think that's the most important thing. And you never know where you're going to go with that and what you're going to learn. And just be open to that learning and don't try to say no, because this has to be like this, be punk. Don't, that for me was kind of, as I said, it reminded me just a lot about that spirit and fighting to be, like you were talking about with Nico, this lifelong journey. Sorry to use that overused word, but this lifelong journey to figure out who you are. And then hopefully, enjoying that and embracing it, but also enjoying just trying things out. Anyway, I don't know if I answered your question.
I love that answer.
I love it too.
I love you, Judy. You're so cool.
I love you too.
Oh, come
get
visit.
Together.
Yeah, I was gonna say, come visit. When are you coming?
I will.
I was just gonna say
Likewise.
That's like such a good answer, and I don't really know how to follow that up. But you know what? It ties totally in with that. I would say, this is gonna sound really strange, but what I found so weird is how my story connected with other. This is not going to sound that strange, but like I interviewed Dave Navarro from Jane's Addiction, and I love Jane's Addiction. And it was so weird because, and you girls know from interviewing various people, when you're talking, he loved Nico, he loved the Velvet Underground, he loved Susie and the Banshees. I love Susie and the Banshees. And so when you start talking to someone about something that both shaped you, like Dave came up listening to Susie, I came up listening to Susie, being like a goth and a punk. And suddenly he and I are just nerding for like half an hour, being like, oh my God, this Susie track. Oh my God, Sisters of Mercy. And it's like the friendships that came out of a shared love and understanding for the things that made me, like the punk rock of it, the like being a nerd music fan obsessed. And it totally makes sense, obviously. Like Jane's Addiction informed who I am. Susie and the Banshees informed who I am. Susie and the Banshees informed who Dave was. And it just, I don't know, it just kind of was life affirming in a really weird, I'm probably not making sense. I was very life affirming in a weird way. And there are these people that seem so untouchable. Like it probably was saying the same when you're talking like someone like Clem Burke from Blondie about being, is he Latino? Is Clem Burke Latino?
No, he's not. No,
I was going to say, I thought he was Jewish,
Latino.
but I could be wrong. I don't know. But
he was, I don't know. But he was just basically talking about his experience. Well, he was saying to me, we had a conga player for a while in Blondie. But just talking to these people and them just talking about their lives, You're
just nerding and you're just you're like
nerding out.
You're just nerding and you're just like, oh my God. And like, you realize like, it's so easy. These are people like, it's so weird. These are people with the wham. Like I was saying, like I'm working on this wham stuff. These are people I had on my wall. They created who I am. Yeah. And now I'm dorking out with them being like, oh my God, dude, that track. Oh my God. Like I'm talking to them like I'm talking to you right now. And there's something just kind of like full, like, world coming around about that, especially we're living in such a weird time that there's something that just makes me really happy about that. And it's the power of working on these kind of projects, especially something that was really dark and a lot of times like Nico, to be able to have that connection with people was really good for me. So that's kind of what I learned, I guess, is the power of music to connect people, which is super cheesy, but true.
It's so true. Yeah,
it is indeed. So thank you very much. I think it's been an honor. I love what you're doing, and I hope you keep on writing and doing podcasts that I can read and enjoy and hear, and also everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and come visit me.
Same. If you ever come to Berkeley,
in Barcelona.
Yeah. Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.